Well, thank you for having me on the show. I'm honored to be a guest and happy to have a good chat. hmm Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a really big question, but obviously a very important one, right? Because I think the last couple of years we've realized how important our personal health, mental health, and well-being is. Um, you know, uh, because of what's happened. But for me, for one of the things about my mental health that's been a huge benefit for me is a daily element of gratitude, if that makes sense. So for from a mental health perspective, there's kind of a sequence that I follow, and it's not my own. I can't remember exactly where I found it, but I go through this kind of uh, waking routine each day. Like I said, the opposite of a bedtime routine, um, where I wake up, I take a moment before getting out of bed. I go through this process. So I set intentions for the day. So I go through a couple of things in my head that are really important for me to get up and tackle that day as far as like an objective is concerned. Forgive mistakes. So, in reflection of the previous day and any other scenario as well, I think of areas that I can maybe express some forgiveness, and that has been a really important thing for me, particularly in the last couple of years. And I've fallen off of it from time to time, and it's actually one of the areas that I notice the most improvement on myself and my own well-being and mental health when I'm able to consistently do that. Then I start to shift forward to a more proactive, like personal element, and it's express gratitude. And I do that, and I think of a handful of things that I am grateful for, both in my life in the near term, like basically going from like micro to macro. And the last thing I do is smile. It's as silly as it sounds. And usually I don't have to consciously do that one. As I go through the express gratitude portion, it naturally happens because I start to think about things that obviously I'm very happy about and things that make me happy. And that kind of routine on a daily basis for me has been a big part of my mental health. And the other part that I've started to work on a little bit more, and this actually came from my fiance, and I noticed a big improvement during a recent point in time where I was kind of struggling a little bit, is just writing out my thoughts, even if it's just stream of consciousness for me. I noticed that if I can pick a starting point in writing out my thoughts from like a journal perspective, uh, what flows out of there is a natural like processing of my thoughts and how I'm feeling and things like that. And by the end, by the time I get to it, it's like almost like a working script of like how I've processed and worked through those things. And I look at it and it brings me like a little bit of, not necessarily closure, but a little bit of um, relief, as far as like, I just went through that. I attacked it. I processed it. I had a better understanding of it. And it comes out in a very natural way of like physically penning it down. And there's something very um, powerful about me physically writing things down. I am more of a note taker in pen versus like on my computer. So I write my notes down, and I notice that both of those things uh, tend to help me not just process, but also uh, kind of catalog everything and retain it is the better way of putting it. And so those kind of things are things that I've been really been working on, and those that little like waking routine has been really helpful for me. And then I can go back and I can touch on any of those points. So like, man, I wish I could remember where I got it, but I used to have those on note cards posted up. So when I woke up and I rolled over to get ready for my phone, I saw those note cards before I reached for my phone. Because I think that's the natural process. You wake up, what time is it? Go check your phone, like get going. And so had a reminder of those things in the natural line of action to where I was going to grab my phone. And that's been a huge like mental aspect for me, mental element for me. As far as physical health and well-being, I think from a CrossFit, from a methodology standpoint, I love CrossFit. I love the community. I love all the things that happen inside of the gym and affiliates that help really feed the mental and physical side of people. But I also understand that not everyone is always ready for that step or that piece in their journey. For me, it's one, getting outside, two, moving in a way that makes you sweat for at least 30-ish minutes a day. And when you get done with it after each session and you walk away from it, you should feel accomplished and happy and enjoy a sense of enjoyment from what you've just done. And those are kind of broad, and I realize there's a lot of things that fulfill that. And I think that I've over time have become more broad in my approach to that, because I realize that certain things fit people just better. And I noticed that usually if I adhere to those three things, then overall the quality of life seems to improve. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Certain things stand the test of time, and for good reason. And um, yeah, I don't know what it is. Something about taking that, whatever happens from the time you think of it into that processing to physically write it out, there's just something tactile about that experience for me that just is so, I don't want to say visceral, but it's so important in like helping me process and catalog that. And um, it was very, very helpful in recent history for me. And it was something that I got away from for a while, and its effectiveness in helping me process some things was a nice, refreshing way to remind myself that, like, hey, this is really important. It can be very beneficial too. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are pitfalls to it as well, but like it is amazing that we do have pretty much the world at our fingertips, right? We have these supercomputers in our pockets, but the tendency of that, and I think in general for us, is to kind of overstimulate that, and it's always like you always have the phone on, or you always have something going on, and we can fall into that routine of overstimulation. And it's very good sometimes to be able to have the skill. And I think it's very much like skills in the gym, right? Like you may not need it in any one specific way, but building the skill set to be able to perform certain things at a moment's notice, I think is always beneficial to the holistic side of it. Being able to, if you need to, shut things off, throw the blinders off, and focus completely and efficiently on something is no different for me than like I hear it all the time from people, like, why would I need to walk on my hands? In CrossFit, like, why would I need to handstand walk? And I'm like, listen, there's probably never a time in your real world that you're going to need to walk on your hands, but I can tell you the skills that you will get from practicing, from learning to walk on your hands, and the shoulder girdle stability and the coordination and the fine motor tuning, and the physical benefit of overcoming a challenge that you set for yourself is going to be fruitful to you in a variety of ways, right? The benefit for people isn't always like a one-to-one comparison based on like what you're going to do in regular life. A lot of times there's additional benefits outside of that through the process, and to me that's also the benefit of being able to journal or shut it off, or switch speeds in life depending on what's going on. And I think it's incredibly important for a lot of people who have big swings of intensity in the things that they do, for whether it's CrossFit, whether it's for us, we have times of high intensity for work and broadcasts and things like that. And then in order to balance that out and find that balance, you have to be able to shut it down and flip the engines the other direction. Otherwise, you'll wear out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Totally. Oof. Well, I'm very fortunate to go to an awesome gym here in Santa Cruz, West Fitness. A dear friend of mine is the head trainer, one of the owners. He runs a great gym there. So 4-ish times a week, I'm making it in there for class. So training in my community with my people, my friends, on a regular basis. And then at least once or twice a week, I try to do some longer monostructural type stuff. I'll throw like a long run. I love trail running, being out in the open and running. It's just it's always been something I've enjoyed, and it's been a way that I have some me time. And then I'll either throw that or like some work on the bike, just headphones in, kind of in my own space operating. And then there's some supplemental stuff that I'll do, ice baths, some sauna here and there that I'll throw in to kind of like, it's also a lot of the stuff I do outside of just intensity in the gym is very much on the other side of it, like time with myself, a little bit lower intensity, a little bit more drawn out, which is like those sauna and even those ice bath sessions. And then I'm in the process of working my way back up into some martial arts stuff side of my fitness. So jiu-jitsu, and hopefully going to start back up with some kickboxing and Muay Thai striking stuff that I just genuinely enjoy. And then I feel like I'm giving you like the longest answer ever now, because I'm like going through my head, because for me, and maybe this is the simplest answer, for me, play is a massive part of my fitness, right? So like I do the gym stuff in the gym, I go for runs and things like that are helpful for me in my overall fitness, but I also like the applied element of it. So like I'll go play jiu-jitsu, I'll go play kickboxing. There's a pickup game every week for basketball that I'm like, when I'm on my fitness, I go and play every week, and I feel great doing it because I love playing basketball. And there are other sports that I like to just go physically play, that I think are healthy and beneficial applications of the fitness that I build in the gym. So that's kind of how fitness works for me, and it's honestly always evolving, which is frustrating for my fiance at times, because she's always like, you signed up for this or you're doing that, like why? And I'm just like one of those people that I love playing all the sports, I love doing all the physical activities, like I like seeking out new physical challenges too, and I don't know, I like to compete too, so like those are all just like part of my nature, I think. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. I love it. Hey, it's funny. About 4 years ago, I went through a really big chest binge. A bunch of people that I was working with, we were all starting to get into it, and like, um, it's. I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy jujitsu. Is it's very much like, it's like living. It's like human chess, but with like, I think someone who coined it like human chess with dire consequences. So, but it, yeah, or having a limb taken from you. Um, but I definitely like. It's interesting. Also, like for me, the arena of competition, and some people are different, and I realize it's not the same for everyone. Some people are very good at like maximizing their potential within the confines of the training. For me, I've never been able to do that. I am able to make improvements and grow and learn in training, but the biggest like orders of magnitude in terms of improvements that I find are usually in the competitive arena. Um, I'll be stuck at something for the longest time, whether it's a snatch or a clean, or it's a pace that I'm holding on the rower, or it's a a dribble pull up sequence in basketball, or it's a crossover move in lacrosse, and a shot that I can't quite get nailed down. That suddenly in competition, like um, for lack of a better term, like it's like Spider-Man, his like the hairs on his arm like raise up when his spider sense goes on. Like when the whistle goes, or like 3, 2, 1 goes, and a competition, that just like that happens to me. And not to make me sound like any sort of like accomplished athlete, I am just better than I am relative to training. Like a better version of myself is what shows up, and I think that I I have a healthy guess as to where it comes from, and like I grew up with a good amount of competition surrounding me, whether it was me competing in sports with my dad, my cousins, friends, things like that. But and then I'm able to take that back in training, and it changes the trajectory of my training as a result. And some people don't need competition; they're great in training, and sometimes competition is actually a point of stress for them. For me, it's the other way around, and so I think that's one of the reasons why I seek it too, because I realize that under those stress points, a lot of growth can happen. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there is some benefit too, in like in terms of there's a dealing with the anxiety, but I think in many ways, one of the things I've loved about competing in general, but the day to day of training in the affiliate is it kind of, I don't want to say desensitizes to us, but it teaches us how to process with um, elements of failure, right? So not abject failure, because it's kind of all relative given how we're competing with ourselves and our former selves and trying to improve ourselves. But I think there's so many different ways where you experience at least a tiny bit of failure in the gym, whether it's one lift that you missed, or you redlined a little bit too hard and you missed a rep on the wall ball, or you were shooting for 30 to start reps at this thing to start your Metcon, and you did 25 and you had to take stock and step back. And it almost makes, and I think that's one of the beauties of the class system and the affiliate environment, is it kind of, for lack of a better term, creates a safe space for us to fail on a regular basis, and as a result, lose our fear of failure and be able to push past it, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, totally. Oh, I love it. Oh man, I when you find out, let me know and I'll come visit. Epic. Oof. Man, leadership. Man, you should have given me this for a while. That's a big question. I think, um, I think it's a combination of things, and I'm just going to start kind of throwing some stuff out there that I think hopefully will eventually meet in the middle in some sort of cohesive thought. But I definitely think one aspect of leadership is um, being able to handle certain aspects of uncertainty, doubt, fear, things that typically hold people back, and shoulder those elements for the sake of others in order to help them push forward. Um, so, the amount of times that I've realized that like certain people that I thought were great leaders, that I thought had it all figured out, they weren't necessarily in any different circumstance than I was. But the difference is those doubts, the uncertainty, the lack of information, or whatever it may be that was holding a lot of us back. They were willing to look past those and shoulder that for the rest of us to ease our own doubts, to then press forward, without the fear of failure, I guess, to kind of circle back to when it's something I also meant. And what I've noticed is that like good leaders have also realized that there's more than one way to get where you're going, if that makes sense, which also feeds into that idea that I just mentioned. So like they can kind of set a broader heading, realizing that there's a range of what can be possible for us to accomplish whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish. And by setting aside those fears and taking that step forward, um, we're one step closer to whatever that end goal is. And that's very broad. And I realize that it's not like super, super insightful, but for me, like, I think the people that I see as good leaders are unafraid to take that step. And maybe that's more of kind of how I view leadership, I guess. But I look at like, the pack or the group of whoever is being led. And I think a lot of them are unwilling to make that first step, and they're waiting for someone else to turn and tell them that it's okay to take that first step, right? And I think that the good leader is that person that, in the absence of all those other things that are holding those people back, can turn and tell them to take that first step. And I really think it's just man, I'm kind of like processing this in real time. Maybe it's an ability to see like the bigger picture that allows them to take that first step and understand that, it's going to be the first of many, and that we can figure it out along the way. But because I don't want to like just say like confidence and things like that, because I do think those things like play into people, right? Because a lot of times confidence is enough to convince people to follow you if you want to lead them. But I don't know. I'd like to unpack that first step kind of mentality, because I think in so many ways, being a leader, whether intentionally or unintentionally, involves a willingness to take a first step that many other people aren't willing to take. Whether that's taking that first step to entertain the idea of leading people, or taking that first step regardless, and then having people follow you as a leader as a byproduct of that, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if I have a fully complete answer to that. That's a good question. Yeah. I think the closest thing I can give you to like where I'm at now with that might be, I think a good leader is a person that, generally speaking, amidst the chaos that is life, is repeatedly willing to take that first step forward. To many, but whoops. I don't know if I've ever met a true leader that wasn't willing to take that step, right? Maybe that's where I'm at with that. Because there are some elements of being a leader that I also think involve knowing when to step back and follow as well, right? But I do think that first step is entirely crucial. But I think that's where I'm at right now. I'll have to process that a little more. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I think like that willingness to try, right? I one of the things I really like, and this was funny enough, at the time I didn't appreciate um, the I guess the phrase as it was related to us. Um, and it has a variety of applications. Is you know part of knowing what works or what you want or what you know is knowing what you don't know or what doesn't work or what you don't want, and so by virtue of trying and failing and having that negative feedback, you also understand the parameters of what you do want. And it's an other side of the coin type statement that was given to me by one of the, I guess he was the original media director for CrossFit, Tony Budding. And he said it at the time, and I was young and dumb and kind of like, that seems kind of interesting. And then the more like I processed it and went through life, I was like, yeah, part of knowing what I want is also knowing what I don't want, and part of knowing what I know is knowing what I don't know. And like it's like, helping understand the things that you don't understand is also like gives you a clear path forward. So I really like that as it relates to like the act of just physically trying and willing to put yourself out there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Totally. Okay. Ooh. Hmm. The greatest piece of life advice. Huh. That's interesting. Nothing. There isn't necessarily one thing in particular that stands out, and maybe on another day there would be. I've been very fortunate to have learned a lot of lessons from a lot of different people in very ways, both like some overt and some you know through some sort of like osmosis, just observing and watching. Um, hmm. I think it sounds weird, but I think one of the best pieces of advice I've gotten, and it's advice through by example, I think, is the example that my parents have given me through watching their relationship, both from a marital standpoint and the relationship of how they've handled friends, us as kids, and reflecting on that. I think, if that makes sense. Um, I think I feel very fortunate to be someone that can naturally create relationships with people, whether it's friendships, working relationships, things like that. I feel very comfortable on like an interpersonal level with people. I think a lot of that stems from how I viewed my parents manage relationships, both their own and externally. Uh, and I feel like they have always set a very good example for me. I'm having a hard way of putting that into like a concrete, um, like single piece of advice, but like, it sounds weird, but like my dad turned 66 3 days ago, and I was chatting with some people like, oh, my dad's 66. We're gonna go do this and we'll do that for them, and it's like, oh man, it's great that like as an adult now, you feel comfortable going and spending time with your parents, going out to dinner, like actively engaging them and things like that. Your parents as a unit, as a marital unit, enjoy spending time with each other and actively seek out adventure together. And I'm like, yeah, man, that is kind of cool, because I think the in so many instances today we've seen relationships and marriages and things like that just kind of dissolve and go by the wayside because people aren't willing to invest in them. And I think maybe a good way of putting it is there is a selflessness to how my parents approach relationships that has allowed them to have lasting and long lasting and fruitful relationships with people. And I think that is something that they have in many ways passed down to me, if that makes sense. So I am, yeah, an element of selflessness and empathy, and that I think I have been at times, and I'm obviously I fail at it just as just as much sometimes because I think that's part of the process. But like I'm able to have really close like friends that I would do anything for, and create like friendships and stuff like that, and that I would you know go to the ends of the earth for. So like, yeah, like an example is that like a lot of my friends from growing up, I'm still very close with. Like all my friends from school growing up, like we get together every year and we still spend a lot of time together. I was just with like my best friend yesterday from school. It was his birthday on 4th of July too. So he was a freedom baby. Yeah. Shout out Craig. Yep. Oh, that's funny. No, it's good. It's good. It's good. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think I've seen my parents more often than not above like material gain and things like that very much invest in people, and that is something that I very much like to do, and I have at times been able to emulate because of the example they set, and I think that's probably the best thing that I have been given, whether it's advice or an example. Maybe it's an advice by example, but it is something that is for me given me more joy and allowed me to be and I guess you'd have to ask them too, but to try and be a source of joy for others as well. Hmm. Hmm. No doubt. Yeah, I'm very fortunate in that regard for sure. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. I don't know if I could say I've gotten the worst piece of life advice. Um, I don't know. As corny as it may sound, I think even bad advice sometimes can be helpful, right? If you kind of go from like uh, the mindset that I talked about earlier about like, well, I know that doesn't work now. So part of knowing what was work is like that was not the business for me. So um, I don't know if um, I don't know if I've ever like I can say that there was like a single piece of just like bad advice that I've ever had, unless it's like something objectively bad, like commit crimes or something like that. I don't think I've ever been given advice to like go commit crimes or anything like that. But for overall, I can't say that it's like I've gotten something that stands out that was just like, oh gosh, I learned nothing from that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. just keep going. I think that I have effectively pivoted from like a career standpoint, in, depending on who you talk to, anywhere between 3 and 4 times. And each one of those times, the direction that I ultimately ended up going was scary and new, and but in like deep down in my gut felt like the right decision. Felt like the thing that I should be doing. But like we all have our doubts and we all have our moments of questioning ourselves. But more often than not, I felt like I just keep going, keep putting a foot in front of the other, just keep pushing forward, keep doing the things that I like to do that make me happy, and doing those things on a regular basis with the goal that I want to accomplish in mind. Then generally speaking, it's worked out in a way that I can be very appreciative for, and even beyond that, whether it's relationships or bumps in the road and things like that have kind of like stalled out. I think the natural urge or human nature at times is we hit that wall and we kind of like sit there for a little while, and it feels like we're never going to get going again. And it kind of comes back to that first step again, like just take that first step again and just keep going. I think more often than not for me, like when if I'm having a difficult time or I'm uncertain about what I'm doing, like just keep going is something that I can kind of rally around in my head, or tell my younger self to like let them know that like, listen, man, it may not be the path that you intended or how you envisioned, but it's on the other side of that is going to be something good for you. Totally. And the view might be better than you expected. Yep. Yeah. It's funny, for a cartoon movie about fish, there's a lot of good stuff packed into that movie. hmm hmm Oh, totally. Yeah, totally. Hey, get out your swamp. That's a good 3-word one. Oh, well. Absolutely, man. Thanks again for having me. Appreciate the chat. Thanks for, man, asking some challenging questions and making me process more. And hopefully, like you said, we get to hang out in person. I'd love to do it again. Thanks, man.